G'day. This is Chris McEwen from the Australian thrash metal band Hidden Intent here. You might remember me from episode 243. Just wanted to plug our new album Dead End Destiny. If you love a bit of old school thrash such as Sacred Reich, Slayer, Megadeth, Mortal Sin, with some ochre Aussie humour thrown in for good measure, then I kindly invite you to have a listen to Dead End Destiny on your favourite streaming service, or if physical media is your thing, then you can grab a CD, a killer 7-colour album print tee, or a limited edition blood splatter vinyl at hiddenintentofficial.com/shop. Get a dog up here, over to you, Mr. Andy Dowling.
Welcome to the Antisocial Podcast, and before we kick into this episode, you know the drill. Patreon.com/Andy Dowling is the best way to support this podcast. Support starts from only $1 a month, dirt cheap, set and forget, and you can get access to exclusive things such as a Patreon podcast every Tuesday morning, 6 a.m. Sydney time, and additional free stuff, giveaways, merchandise, blah, blah, blah. Everything's over at patreon.com/Andy Dowling. Get amongst it. Was this quick enough? Yes. Okay, let's kick into the episode. Hey, welcome back to the Antisocial Podcast. This is episode 285 of the show. And my guest on this episode is Riccardo Ball. Riccardo is a bit of a staple in the New Zealand heavy metal scene. He's been around the traps for a long time. His band, Just One Fix, have been around for donkey's years. In fact, when we, Lord, were last in New Zealand, and fuck, that was a long time ago. We're getting closer to 10 years. Oh, geez, we're due a tour back. But we played with Just One Fix a couple of times over there. They're amazing guys, really good dudes, and Riccardo has been a massive part of not only just as a performer and being in a band and a part of that New Zealand scene, but even in the media, being on radio, programming music and promoting metal in New Zealand. And now he's got his radio show, The Metal Bar, as well, and just doing amazing things. He's just a wealth of knowledge. He's got amazing stories. And as always, knowing me, we only just scraped the surface. We just got started, and then we had to wrap it up. So I'm going to get Riccardo back on in the coming weeks, because I've got a few things to talk to him about, and I allude to that at the end of this conversation. So go and follow Riccardo on the socials. Go and follow Just One Fix on the socials, Spotify, Apple Music, etc., etc. I'll have all, and of course, the Metal Bar, of course. I'll have all the links in the show notes over at andysocial.net and andydowling.net. But you know what I'm going to say. Enough crapping on from me. Please enjoy this great chat with Riccardo Ball. This is a bit of unknown for me, because I was going through and go back and listen to some of the old releases that you guys have put out over the years, and some stuff that I remember from years back when, you know, we play the odd show together and come over to New Zealand. And so the songs that I remember, but there's one song, and I was really confused, because I thought, this doesn't sound like you guys at all. And I know this is going to be the dumbest question for any New Zealand mates that are listening in, because they're going to know you guys so well. But there's a song on Spotify that's sitting in your top 5 called My Vagina. Mm-hmm. What is that?
That is a very good question. That was on our first album, Price of Salvation. And that was actually one that our bass player, Ant, brought to the band from his old band. So it was one that he wrote. He's singing on it. That's not me singing. That's him singing on it. And it was a song that he really liked, that he had written with that band and never got the opportunity to record it. And we were looking for songs, we'd written, and we had a few songs from back in the, the older days of the previous singer that we reworked and things. And, and we were looking for another song. And it was like, and we were playing it live just as kind of a bit of a gimmick. But then he was like, why don't we do this? So we recorded it. Yeah, so that's Ant's baby, that one. And that's, because most of the rest of our stuff, as you alluded to, when I write, I tend to write about something. So not that my vagina is not about something, but
not yours. But anyway.
I tend to think politically, or I think things, state of the world type shit, or things that grind my gears, for want of a bit of a term. A lot of kind of calling into question a lot of religious stuff and things like that. So yeah, it definitely stands out. Whereas Ant, whose nickname in the band for a long time was Stuntcock, which came from a gag that we had going on about that was that he used to be John Holmes's Stuntcock. That's what he used to do, So, and he had another band, not the band that that broke up that he couldn't record that song with, but another band that we would tour with at the same time, and he was the front man for that, and he would play, I don't know how many strings this bass guitar had on it, maybe 6 or 7. And he also played electric cello, but he just dressed in bondage gear and had a gimp mask on, and they were called Ward 10. They're just absolutely fucking mental. So, that's kind of where that came from, and that's why it stands out. And, you can imagine from the point of view of me and Sean, probably, I don't know how Sean feels about it, but it's certainly me. I look at our Spotify plays, and our highest played original song on Spotify is that one. And you're like, fucking really? After all those times I've slaved over lyrics about the injustice of this and the fucking this of that and everything, it's one about a dream a guy's had that he's got a vagina and what he would do with it. That's the one that people want to listen to.
It's the relatable track. All the males listening going, yeah, true that. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, I'd do that. Yeah, I'd do that. Yeah.
I mean, this guy, was Ant playing in the band when we played with you guys?
I don't think he was. So the band started in about 98, 99, around there. And then I joined in about 2003. And when I joined, we had a drummer named G-Force, and she was a great drummer. And when I joined, it was her, and we had another bass player at the time. And then he left, and we got Anton. And then Ant and G hooked up and ended up, they're married with 3 kids now. And they did that first album with us, but when we put that out, and I think we played a show with Hell Yeah's first tour of Australasia. We opened for them in Auckland, and G played that show. That was her last show with us. She was 6 months pregnant, and we dropped that album and did that show. So we did that show and then dropped the album afterwards. And then Ant was like, "Oh, look, I'm gonna have to take a little bit of a break," and I was like, "Oh yeah, maybe." In my head, because I hadn't been a dad at that point, so I didn't know. I'm thinking, maybe a couple of weeks, maybe a month. And he's like, "No, I'm talking about a year." And so we're like, "Dude, we got a new album. We have to tour it." So we basically said, "Oh, well, listen, I'll just quit. You get another bass player." And we just replaced the drummer, obviously, because G had to leave. So he wasn't in the band when we played with you guys. But then when the bass player that replaced him, Lee, left to go and live in England, and we were looking for a bass player, he was like, "Dude, I'll come back." And we were like, "Sweet. You kind of know some of the songs already." And, we knew him. He's a good dude. He's a friend. So it just made total sense.
I'm just thinking of just sort of back in the day when he was joining the band, any reservations from the rest of the guys in the band at the time, just going, who the hell is this madman coming in with the song? I've got something to contribute, guys. I've got a song called My Vagina, and I've also got another band where I'm dressing up in like bondage gear and playing a cello and all this sort of stuff. Just like, yeah, sure, join. Yeah, go for it, man.
He kind of snuck that past us. We didn't realise until it was too late.
He didn't disclose it.
Yeah. Well, no, to be fair, he's always been... he's a massive wrestling fan, so that helped.
Yeah,
that got him in the door. Massive wrestling, big South Park fan, that helped, got him in the door. And then we kind of overlooked all the other shit, and then it was a bit like, what's going on here? But yeah, no. So.
Oh mate, I love it, and I love that there's. I was just fishing there to see whether there was anything worth holding on to around that song, and it's an absolute perler, and obviously it's something that's just stuck with you guys. It's a bit of a legacy song. Do people, like, when you guys are playing sort of in more recent times, are people coming up to you guys going, "Oh, you guys going to play that song?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gets requested all the time. And I don't think we've played it since he left the band the first time.
Right, okay. And that probably doesn't help either, because it just increases the urge for people to want to hear it be played.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's kind of like what do you call it? The economic theory of it's the want and desire. It's if you hold it back, it increases the value of it.
That's it.
So basically, we're just going to do this for like another 15 years, and then we're going to announce that we're going to do it live again, and then charge like $100 a ticket, and it'll be and it will make millions.
I love it. That's the long. You got to play the long game. You have to play the long game.
Yes. Mate, that's what we've been planning this for since he left the first time. Obviously,
Some people like put money away, like they might buy a property or some shares and things like that. You guys have just got this. You got this song, and you just sitting on it. This is your nest egg.
Yeah, we're banked on my vagina, literally.
The PR marketing sort of hat. I've got that on at the moment. I'm just thinking, the possibilities. There you go.
Well, and given the way things have changed in society since he wrote that song, with people being able to change genders and things, maybe it's even more means more now than it did when he wrote it.
Very true. It could become political. It could become a social, political sort of song that embraces change and brings people together. Oh, geez. I mean, maybe I need to cut this out and just give it to you so you can just reflect back on this. I don't want to give it away to anybody else. Someone might cover my vagina and take away the entire thing.
Well, you know who's going to fucking cover it, don't you? Fucking Lord. They cover everything.
Yeah, touche.
But I was thinking about that because, this song could actually end up being semi-autobiographical if Ant gets, gender reassignment surgery. So, potentially.
Well, that could be another thing as well. Depending on how committed everyone is, especially Ant, to this idea, he could actually just put his hand up and go, look, I'm going to take one for the guys. I'm going to go through this whole process, get the change, just so we can actually have an additional layer of storyline around this song and make it even more meaningful because, straight away you're going to hit the charts, you're going to get some publicity, you're going to get on the talk shows, I'm getting excited just thinking about it. I think we really need to have an intervention with Ant and sit him down and go, mate, this is what needs to happen, and you're going to say yes.
Yeah, exactly. And then we'll get Lord PR on the job.
That's right. I'll walk in with my briefcase, put it down and go, rightio, this is the plan.
Here we go, boys. Or girls.
Yeah,
or whatever, however you're identifying today.
That's it. So, I think one of the things I wanted to chat to you about, because the band's been around for so many years, and as you mentioned, I think you said you joined the band around 2003. Was that right?
I think it was 2003, 2004. It was just after my first divorce. Okay. So it was around there sometime. Yeah.
Was that? So just a quick tangent on that, just because you mentioned it. It was you sort of fronting a metal band and sort of getting into that a bit of a release from what was no doubt probably a bit of a hectic period in your life.
Oh, definitely. It was, a time that it was, I kind of rediscovered myself, I think you would say, because I got married and, it was somebody that I'd known previously, and then they had left the country and gone to live in Oz, actually, and then came back. And they came back and hit me up, and we hooked up, and then just before we got married, she discovered God, which is never a good thing. And then that kind of really changed the dynamics. And I kind of had to, in a way, change kind of how I behaved and what I did and things I said and all that for the good of, the relationship, I guess. And it just ended up as it wasn't healthy for me. It was an exercise in frustration. And, there's only so many times you can go and watch a fucking Christian musical that she was singing in without cutting yourself to within an inch of your life. So I think that's a fair call. And, when we talk about how I came to be in the band, Sean, the guitar player, who's the one original member from the start, he went to the same high school that I did, but he was a few years younger than me. And I had a band then that he remembers seeing, and that's kind of what inspired him to pick up guitar. So there's kind of a bit of a story there too. And just to really, put into focus how much I turned my life around from being in a committed relationship with somebody who went to church a lot. I ran into Sean as he was walking out of Showgirls strip club and I was walking in.
I've known you guys for a few years, but I don't know you guys that well. But for me, that vision there's no surprises there. Like, it just doesn't even, it's not even a shock to the system. It just sounds like you guys. So there you go.
Yeah, exactly, mate. Exactly. It was my rebirth.
Well. So, I mean, as you said before, with, moving away from, the song My Vagina, but like some of the other songs that you guys have been putting together over the years, I mean, a lot of the lyrical content has been, political and sort of questioning religion and things like that. And I assume that sort of those experiences that you had firsthand, where your life sort of got turned upside down with the relationship that you're in, would have fueled a lot of the content, a lot of the lyrical content that you end up contributing to the band.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it wasn't just that, but I got brought up Catholic, as probably a lot of us did. And then when I was about, I don't know, probably 12, 13, somewhere around there, my mum recanted her Catholicism.
Wow.
Which is a big thing for a Catholic to do, and became a Baptist. And so she was like full born again.
Wow.
And that was because she read the good book and identified that they, in that the word of God apparently says about, you don't put anybody before me or anything like that. And she looked at Catholicism and went, well, they pray to fucking saints, and they pray to, well, she probably didn't say fuck, but, they pray to saints, they pray to Mary. That's not right. And so she kind of questioned it and decided she was out, and she became a full-on born again. And then the impact that had on me growing up was big, and mainly in a negative way. Like, I'm pretty tight with my mum now, but through my teenage years, we had a lot of conflict, and a few times come home to broken records and posters ripped off walls and things because of some lyrical content she'd found or whatever, or some evangelists that she'd heard from the US, some tape, Satanic Panic, all that shit, because that's how old I am. It was all around that kind of time. So and I was always thought it was all a load of bullshit, and I always remember having those conversations when I was a kid and going, so you're telling me that people that don't believe in this go to hell? And I'd go, yeah, you should say, yeah. And I'd be like, well, what about a 3-year-old with cancer born in, Iran, who has no choice in the matter because of the culture they're brought into, because that seems like bullshit to me. And, she often didn't have answers to those kind of questions. And so I never fell for it. And I started reading things like Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins as I got older. And, been a full-blown atheist, I suppose you would say, since I was probably, old enough to read that stuff. But before that, I had always questioned it anyway. So, probably well over half my life thinking, as a good friend of mine likes to put it, when you die, the worms at you. And that's about it.
Mate, I've crept on about this on the podcast a couple of times, but long story short, very similar set of circumstances for me. I mean, I'm very, very close to my mum, love her dearly, but both my parents went through this conversion when I was sort of, would have been sort of in primary school. So before I got to my teens, and they went from just very sort of, what would you call it? Sort of just brought up in some sort of Christian sort of household, but not like any practicing Christian, just out of, tradition sort of, perspective. But, when they had, kids, myself and my brother, they I don't know how it happened. I probably should just actually ask my mum this properly, but I think my mum met somebody who gave her a book about this place in Bosnia, Medjugorje or whatever it's called, and it's these kids who saw the Virgin Mary, these apparitions, and so it just became this massive thing where my parents just became converted, became Catholics, and because I think, like a lot of us, like just when you discover something new and it's exciting, you want everybody else to be on board as well. And so for me and my brother, we got swept up in it, taking to church and all that sort of stuff. And it all came from a good place. But for us, I mean, I can't speak on behalf of my brother, but for myself, same sort of thing as you said. I always questioned it. It never made any sense to me. Like the dots did not connect, and it was painful in the sense that, you get dragged along to church and sit on a wooden pew and just be bored out of your wits, just rolling your eyes the entire time going, what the fuck am I doing here? And so it was just always the case. And my parents are both like, they're part of the community, and, they do volunteer work, and they're still part of the church and all that sort of stuff. And I think they probably have a good argument that the community aspect of it has been really good for them, and they've got a lot of great friends. But I've always had this underlying tension from a family dynamic about this whole thing, because I've just been so anti all of that, and I've dabbled in a lot of Dawkins and Hitchens and the likes over the years as well. So I totally can relate to a lot of what you said, and just hearing that context as well makes me think that when you met this person that you ended up marrying, and then she discovered God and all this sort of stuff, not only is that just probably difficult to deal with, but I think with all that context of your own family upbringing and that sort of rebellious sort of aspect with that would have been so much fucking harder for you to go, how do I process this? How do I manage it? Because this is just an absolute conflict of all of my values.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because what I didn't mention there, which might shed a bit more light on it, is that my father's never been religious. And him and my mother are still together.
Yeah, right.
And so they've stayed together through her, obviously discovering whatever she discovered, and he's never been into it. And so I looked at it like, well, if they can do it, I can do it.
Yeah, okay.
And to be fair, that was the hardest thing, because we weren't married for very long, I think maybe 2.5 years, but I could easily have pulled the pin after about 1.5 years. But I felt like that would be a failure if I did that.
Yep.
Because I thought that I could make it work based on, well, if the old man can put up with this shit, for as long as he has, surely I can. But apparently I don't. My father's a lot more patient than I am. So that's one thing I learned from there. But yeah, and I do recall, some funny instances growing up. Even when my mum was still a Catholic. I remember her, I don't know how old I was, maybe 8, 10, somewhere around there, sat at the coffee table in the lounge, I should say, writing my name out in big letters, first, middle, surname, and then had numbers under them. And she was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, allocating, counting the numbers of the alphabet 1 through to 26, and then putting whatever the number was under the letters of my name, and then adding all the numbers up to see if I was the Antichrist. And she was fucking horrified. Because his name will add up to 666. Mine didn't, unfortunately.
I'm going to do that after we get off this call. I'm going to work it out. Send it to my
I don't
mom.
even know if that's how it works, but in my simple child's mind, that was what you did.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Oh, it's hilarious. It's so good. Oh, mate. Oh. So I won't harp on the religious stuff, but I mean, you just mentioned that in passing, so I clung on to that for dear life, because it's always, I think it's, for me, it's like, it's always been an ongoing part of my life, whether I like it or not, and it comes back in different ways, whether you meet people, and I think the biggest thing I struggle with is that I will meet people in my travels who I just absolutely adore. Like I have a lot of respect for, just amazing people who've achieved a lot, and then after a while, through just conversation with them, or it might be somebody that I haven't personally met, but admired from afar, and I read a book of theirs or whatever, and then I discover that they are heavily religious, and it's all their underpinnings of their values, and it's such a struggle for me to go, to get over it, and I have to sort of really dig deep to sort of put that to the side and just remember why I admired that person in the first place. So I think it's still something that maybe I need to do a bit of therapy. I don't know,
Yeah, that's what this feels like. I feel like I need a couch, Dr. Dowling. I need to lie down.
Well, if anything, the other way around, I'll have to lie down. I think you might have to talk some reason into me. But
yeah. Well, it's interesting because we're writing new stuff at the moment. We demoed some stuff recently, and that theme continues. I'm still kind of passionate about it. It still interests me, and I still read about it. And there's a French philosopher who I discovered a few years ago called Denis Diderot, who was around in the, I think, like 1780s, 1790s. Mm. And one of the main tenets of his philosophy was, I'm trying to remember, it's paraphrasing, but it was basically, man will never be free until the last king is strangled with the entrails of the last priest.
Jeez, it's intense, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, so, and I really like that. As you can imagine, that's a pretty fucking metal kind of imagery that it brings up to. And so we've got one of our new songs is written entirely based on that premise. It's called Gods and Devils. So we have one for you to listen out for when we finish that in the studio this year.
Gods and Devils. All right, I've written that down. I'm gonna latch onto that one for dear life. Love it.
I'll send you a demo, Andy. I'll send you a demo.
Yeah, nice, exclusive. Love it.
Yeah.
I'll have a listen.
You'll no doubt it'll be on Undercovers Volume 2 before we've released it.
We're getting a reputation, I tell you what. I love
Actually,
it.
I've got to say, I was in the car with my partner the other day. We were driving, and I played her your cover of "Send Me an Angel," and then the Cutting Crew song too. "I Just Died in Your Arms Tonight."
Yep.
And she was like, "Do these guys do any Madonna? Because it feels like they do Madonna really well." I was like, "I'll suggest it. It'll be on the next album. Don't
Madonna.
worry."
Yeah, right. Okay, I could definitely see that happening as well. I mean, why not? All right. Okay. Okay, I'm going to write that down, Madonna.
You write that down. Make a note.
And I'll have to put a credit in there for you and your partner in there. Oh, it's hilarious. That's so good. Before I did get sidetracked and distracted before, one of the things I wanted to just get a bit of insight and some perspective from you. With you joining the band at that time, and obviously the band being around a few years prior, but overall the band's been around for a hell of a long time, and people have come and gone. Where, especially for Sean and yourself, I mean, where's the head at? Where are your heads at when it comes to the band these days, and sort of just this legacy that you guys have created, but just the amount of people that have come and gone, and even the last 12 months, no doubt, just thinking of 2003, 2004 when you joined, and obviously there's a lot of energy and a lot of sort of purpose around what you guys want to do. But coming into now where you guys are writing music in 2021, is it a different dynamic in the band these days as far as how you just sort of just approach the fact that you guys are in this band that's been around for so long?
Yeah, I think so, because we're a bit like Spinal Tap when it comes to drummers.
Yeah, us too.
So we've had a few. So obviously there was G when we started, and then she left to have a family. We had Martin Kimball, who when he joined, he just turned 18, and I think I was 36 or something when he joined.
Wow.
His nickname was Fetus immediately. And so we had him, and then he left to go to London with our bass player Lee. They were really good mates, and so they kind of left within about 6 months of each other to go to London, and then we had a guy, Steve Bernstein, filled in for a little while, who's played in bands like Metal Tower and a few other death metal bands, more of a death metal drummer. And that was a short-term thing. And then we had a guy, Warren Kelly, who played in a few bands. And then Warren recently moved to Papamoa down on the east coast of the North Island to buy a house and move for work. So now we've got a guy called Ross Curtin playing. So and generally the drummers tend to be a bit younger because as we bring them through, and they kind of bring their own energy and their own influences to bear as well, which then kind of changes our sound a little bit. And I'm always looking for new stuff and listening to new stuff and looking for those influences. And I think, Sean is very much the same. And when we started off, we were very much a dyed-in-the-wool thrash band, and the riffs were very, I guess, Metallica, Slayer-esque. And there's still a big element of that, but we are doing other things. There are definitely some real death metal elements now, some doom metal elements. We had a song called Frazetta Moon off the last album, and that song's just written about Frank Frazetta's artwork and how amazing it is. And the chorus is nothing says doom like a Frazetta moon, because if you look at any Frazetta artwork, if there's a moon in it, somebody's about to die horribly somewhere. That's kind of and so there was that, which was like a really proggy kind of thing as well. Proggy doom is like a song's over 10 minutes long. So we've done a lot of that, and kind of we're willing to sort of take some chances and make some moves and kind of try different things, and we try a lot of stuff when we're writing, and we're like, well, what about that, and will that work, and let's try that, and how does that feel, and we've done that ending before a couple of times. How are we going to end this one? Let's do this. So we're always challenging ourselves to try and maybe not reinvent ourselves is probably a bit of a cliche, and it's not quite true either, but just evolve slightly each time, do something a little bit different, or something that, somebody who's listened to the last 3 Just One Fix records might not expect, I guess is probably a good way to put it.
Do you guys I mean, I'm just thinking about sort of, I think this is something I've spoken about quite a bit on the podcast, but as you get older as well, just the, priorities of life, Sean, I've just seen recently has had a kid as well, and just everyone's domesticated, responsibilities, life, etc., and just trying to balance that all in with something that you guys have held on to for so many years. Do you guys sort of look at it as it stands and go, obviously musically you want to evolve and sort of keep progressing and doing new things, but as just a band, as a band that exists, are you guys sort of looking at it and going, well, we obviously can't function as a band that we were like when we were in our 20s or early 30s or whatever. Is that something that's conscious with you guys, or is it just more of a case that you just gradually sort of just embedded it into what life is like now for all of you guys?
I think it's been a gradual thing. Yeah. I mean, it's not a conscious decision to go, oh, fuck, I'm 40 now, I can't do that anymore. It's more like, okay, these are the set of circumstances I'm dealing with in terms of, responsibilities, family, work, etc. How can I still do this and make it work for everything? So, it's just making those changes, and everybody's cool. I mean, everybody understands. I mean, Ross, our drummer now, is the only one in the band who doesn't have kids, so everybody's kind of on board with that. And, if we have rehearsal one night and half an hour before practice, somebody rings up and goes, this has happened, this one of my kids has done this, or, Mrs. isn't feeling very well and got to get the kids dinner and stuff. I'm not going to be there until this time, or I might not be there at all. Where in the past you might have gone, oh, fuck, where's your dedication? Now it's like, oh, yeah, I get you. Yeah, no problem at all good.
Yeah, I think that's something that we, like in our band, this is something why it's interesting to me, because I've watched the dynamic in our band change as people get older, and Tim was the first one to have a kid. Mark just recently had a kid about a month ago, actually, and for me, like, I'm the only one in the band that doesn't have kids, but I've watched
what you're paying for.
Yeah. Hope my wife doesn't hear this one. that I know of, yes. But I'm still sort of, I think I'm the one that's sort of trailing behind as far as getting into that same mindset of understanding that the band dynamic is very different to what it used to be. And as far as the expectations and not so much the commitment, because the commitment sounds like, if I say that word, that people aren't committed by having other responsibilities, but it's interesting where you really do need to have a wider lens on the situation and go, this is not something that we need to panic about and try to do everything straight away. It's a long-term thing. It's a part of our lives. And if it means that, using your example, someone can't make it to a prac because, something's happening at home with the family, then that's totally okay. The world's not going to implode, and we keep on, we keep moving forward, and it's completely fine. And we can keep the whole thing a moving. So it's just interesting, because a lot of mates that are sort of, late 30s into their 40s and even their 50s, just watching the dynamic change and their perspective on what music is and how it's a part of their life, because for some people they resist it until the bitter end, and you see that burnout and bands implode, and other guys just totally embrace it and just understand that this is just life, and we adjust and evolve.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, I think it's important to keep that in mind. And like you say, I mean, I don't know about your band, but, we have nights where we're pretty much all there and somebody can't make it for whatever reason. And you're like, oh, well, we might as well just jam. And if we have to do it without the drummer, or we have to do it without the bass player, or, if it's me, and they have to do it without the vocalist, sometimes because you're not treading back through and rehearsing catalog and things like that and staying sharp in that way, you try different things, and you end up writing, and you end up maybe come up with something different, and that wouldn't have maybe happened if that hadn't happened. So every time something like that happens, it's an opportunity, is the way I look at it.
Yeah, it's a good way of looking at it, definitely. I mean, if that dynamic hadn't happened the way that it did, then you wouldn't have been thinking differently to stimulate some sort of creative opportunity that comes out of it. So yeah, it's a great way of looking at it. I'll have that back of mind next time I have a little bit of a hissy fit because somebody in my mind pikes out of the situation for what would be a legitimate reason, but for me just having a little bit of a tanty, I'll go, now, hang on, this is an opportunity.
Exactly. I can be lead vocalist tonight.
That's that's right. Move aside, Tim.
Yeah, exactly. But sometimes from those things, some cool stuff comes out. I mean, there've been a couple of times where that's happened, where the guys have just kind of worked on an idea that Sean's had, and then I turn up to the next one, and they're like, "We've got a song. You need to write lyrics to this." And you're like, "Fuck, okay, cool."
With the writing that you mentioned before that you guys are doing at the moment, have you guys got a timeline or some sort of goal set as far as when you want to get writing finished and go and record and get an album out, or is that sort of a very fluid thing at the moment? Because obviously, the last 12 months has certainly thrown the world out of whack. Where's the mind at with you guys?
Yeah, it is. Well, I mean, this is the thing that Sean can't stop writing at the moment. He's been really productive. He keeps coming in with new riffs and new ideas and things. And it's so what was going to be a 3, maybe 4-track EP is now, well, we've got 5 songs and we might have another one. So are we just going to do an album? And then we kind of look at the finances and things as well, because like you say, things have changed. We're like, well, can we afford to record an album, or do we need to record, 2 tracks here and then in a couple of months' time record another 2 tracks and go as we can afford it? Because that's the other thing too, Andy, which I'm sure you're aware of, but, it's an old school way of thinking, making sure, going in and recording a whole album. And, because we're very much in a digital world now, like, so everything is reliant on streaming and things like that. So, if you want to get on, for example, because they're the biggest, Spotify, New Music Fridays, or you want to get on the new metal playlist or whatever it happens to be, they have those kind of playlists. And if you can get on one, it's fucking great. You take off, massive exposure, you get lots of streams. It's awesome. But if you release an album and then do it the old school way where, you release the album and then every 4 or 5 weeks you put out another single off the album and treat it as a single and maybe do a video for it. Well, the digital platforms don't treat it as a new song now because it's already out. It's on the album. So it's already out. It's not new. So it's almost gone back to that kind of 1950s, 1960s style where you just do singles. Do a single, do a single, do a single, do a single. And when you get to 8 singles, you maybe do a double A side or something, and that's the rest of the album. And then it's a collection. You know what I mean? So it has changed the way we're looking at it. So, we don't know when we're going to stop writing for this period, and we might not. So it's just about how we tackle that. So at the moment, we're looking at potentially May going in and recording with a guy, Dave Rhodes, and recording 3 or 4 songs. But as I mentioned, we've got 5 or 6. So, we can do those 3 or 4 songs, get them mixed, get them mastered. And then, if we're drip feeding those and dropping one every 6 weeks to 2 months out through the Spotifys and things, then by the time we're ready to, to drop the 3rd or 4th one, we might be, we might have the coin there and be ready to go back in and record another 2, and no one will be any the wiser from the outside. It just looks like a smooth process where you're continually releasing music.
Yeah, it's. We've tackled it ourselves as far as trying to work out what's the best way of doing it, and I've seen a lot of mates go through a similar process where, and as you said, like it is literally going back to the 50s and the 60s where it was a total single culture. It was all about just spot recordings of individual songs, and it was all purely for radio airplay or on the old 45s or whatever it might be, and it's just interesting to watch how these platforms, and in particular Spotify, has really changed the behavior of not only the listener but the music industry themselves, and just making sure that your release date's on a Friday now rather than like a Tuesday or something like that can make all the difference with regards to whether your song's going to get heard by 50 people or 5,000 people. And it's such an interesting time to be in. And I think the thing that I've found fascinating by the whole thing is that I don't think even platforms like Spotify know, and I don't think even the music industry themselves really know what the next 12 months is going to look like, let alone 5 or 10 years. And so I think there's still opportunity for bands to do something completely different again in this space, as long as they do it with conviction and actually sort of put a lot of effort into it, and still have a lot of success outside of the current framework of whatever Spotify rewards at the moment. But it's I'm always fascinated to hear what bands are sort of thinking about and where their mind's at with it. And I think the way that you guys are approaching is a really smart way of doing it. I mean, it's a case of just keep banking those songs up in the background, drip feed a few out, and then when it comes time, you hopefully have lined up the costings and the time and get that album out. And as you said, no one will be the wiser.
Yeah, exactly, mate, exactly. So, I mean, a great example for me is there's a New Zealand band called Blindfolded and Led to the Woods. I don't know if you've heard. These guys are out of they're out of Christchurch. And I don't know. I mean, I'm such old school metal guy that I don't even know. I guess you'd call them brutal death metal. Is kind of how I describe them. And they have got a new album out, which is just superb. Like the work they've done on it is amazing. They've got the lead singer from Nile guesting on one track as well, and they've done some really, really good things. They've picked up a lot of overseas attention. So Decibel magazine featured one of their videos on their website front page. Revolver magazine have done it with another video. I think Metal Hammer picked up a video as well. So getting a lot of overseas exposure. The album's called Nightmare Withdrawals if you want to check it out. But, they are very much about online, so you can go to their Bandcamp or, Spotify or whatever, and they're doing it really, really well. And I got an email from them because I follow them on Bandcamp the other day, and they're doing a limited edition CD run, so whereas, a band that's getting that much attention and doing that much stuff, overseas and things, I would have thought, you're going to be doing a first CD print of, I don't know, maybe 1,000, maybe 1,500, and that's what you're going to sell. But they've gone, well, CDs are quickly becoming a thing of the past. So if you want one for your collection, we've done a limited edition run of 100, and that's it. That's all they're going to make. So now CDs are becoming the limited thing that you can buy and collect.
I mean, that's very similar to the way that we've been approaching things now, where, I mean, we're clinging onto the past desperately. I mean, our demographic, our fan base are all just old school metalheads that still want a CD in their collection. But for us, like we're understanding that it's not going to last. It's not going to be like that forever. And so for us, it's like keep reducing the amount that we press, make them limited edition, hand number them, do all that sort of stuff to make them special. And even with this covers album we just put out, the main incentive is to get the 23 tracks and the 2 hours of podcasting and everything through Bandcamp digitally. And if you want, you can get a CD, but the CD's only got 8 tracks out of the 23. And so people on the surface will go, well, why the fuck would I buy a CD with only 8 tracks if I'm not getting the 23? And you go, well, it's limited edition. It's a collector's item. It's hand numbered, and you'll also get the digital download of the whole 23. And it's worked really well. But it's all about, I think you sort of mentioned it earlier in the piece about that sort of scarcity element. When you're talking about economics and just making sure that you sort of hold back on things for a while, and you want to build that demand and make sure that people understand that when the door opens and there is an opportunity, that you can't afford to snooze. You've got to jump in there and take advantage of whatever that is. And the more that you hold back, the more that people just naturally, as a human behavior, just want it more and more. And we've been trying to do a lot more of that over the years, and we've had some success with it. So I love that band, considering how well they're doing, to just go, here's 100. We know we're going to piss off a lot of people because a lot of people are not going to get this, but we know we're going to sell it out, which is just going to make us even more appealing.
Yeah, exactly. And they bundled it with a T-shirt too, so you could do the bundle with a T-shirt.
Yeah, love it.
Package. So yeah, really smart. And they've done similar things with vinyl, but I mean, the CD thing for me, and and I guess for you too, and for our generation, was the big one that I was like, man, I would have expected these guys to do this much, but they're doing this and treating it this way. So yeah, really smart. And to be honest, the first band that I really saw, and I don't know that they were doing it for those reasons. I think they were doing it more for reasons of time management, but was Down. I mean, I'm a big Down fan. And of course those guys have all got other bands. Phil's got a million projects going. Pepper Keenan's got Corrosion of Conformity. Kirk Weinstein had Crowbar and things going on as well. They all had other stuff going on, and then they started doing EPs, and I think they did one EP, and then they did a second EP, and somebody said to them, why are you doing EPs all of a sudden? And they said, well, we've got a fan base that we want to keep happy, but we can never get together long enough to write a full album and record a full album. So we just do what we can when we can and then throw it out. And I thought that's a really smart way of approaching it as well.
I think so. Definitely. I think, it might be a bit of a very sort of shallow statement to make because it's said so often, but we're in a world now where attention span is definitely, compromised. And it's not so much that people naturally have a short attention span, but we're sort of influenced by media that gives you short bursts of information and then quickly changes to the next thing. And so you just slowly start to program your habits to sort of meet with the way that you're presented with things in day-to-day life. And so I think not to sort of be totally controlled by that, but I think to sort of ride some of that wave is to have consistent things happening. I mean, even for us, like, we just had this great run with this covers album that we've done, and already like we're talking behind the scenes, going, okay, well, what do we need to do to keep this momentum going? Whether it be more promotion and more things off the back of this album, or are we going to do another EP, or do we fast track this next album? We started throwing ideas around and things like that, because you just want to make sure that it's not like, especially now because you can't tour like you used to, and I think that's going to be the big game changer, because you would release an album and you go, okay, well, we can get out there and just whore ourselves out, play a bunch of local shows across the country, go overseas, do all this sort of stuff, and you could chew up a year or a year and a half of doing that and really pushing a release and bring it to as many people as possible. But because we can't do that to the extent that we used to now, I think people are going to be looking at other ways to keep the needle moving in that period of time. So maybe singles and EPs and just little things here and there, just drip fed throughout the year, will be what will be sort of the make or break for a lot of bands.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a great you've what you've done has been really clever, and it's worked really well for you, and it's opened up a whole lot of possibilities for you, I mean, particularly with the songs you've covered, the choice of the songs you've covered, given that they're not all metal songs, you've done a lot of pop songs and things that other people who aren't metal fans will know and appreciate.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I see a great opportunity for you guys to do a tour of the leagues clubs. Because
that's right, yeah.
you could play to that audience, you really could. And, who knows? I mean, you're always looking for different merch ideas, Andy, you're like the Gene Simmons of Australia. So, I mean, I'm thinking about with the name of that album, I mean, there's going to be a Lord Range of Manchester, isn't there? You can get your Duna cover with under the covers on it and the artwork. It'd be great.
Oh, mate, I'm going to have to, eventually down the track, I'll get a testimonial page just so people can vouch for me. I'm going to put you on there and just put a cool quote saying the Gene Simmons of Australian metal or whatever. Oh,
do it.
Manchester. All right, Manchester Range. Okay. Oh, mate, look, I can't even laugh at how absurd that suggestion is, because already in the back of my head, I know that I'm already chipping away at that idea. I'm trying to work it out. I'm trying to visualize it. So.
Mate, it ties in perfectly with the name, Under the Covers. Get under your Duna, under the covers, listen to your Lord album. Mate, it's outstanding. Especially if you do because that's the other thing. You could sell blankets at outdoor gigs. You could take a truck around and play outdoor, like those those tailgate parties they have in the States. Get everybody to drive up in their utes, have their barbecues. They can sit down on their deck chairs with their under the covers blankets and watch you guys on the back of the truck play a double set of covers. Brilliant.
All we need is a bloody instigator like you, and then it's all over. It's all over.
Yeah.
We're just, you're like pouring the accelerant on the fire. It's just, here we go. I love it. Taking notes.
10%, 10%.
10% done. All right, yeah, that's all right. Everyone heard that. It's on the record. Oh, mate.
Good stuff.
So just to pivot a little bit, I think one of the other things I really wanted to talk to you about is that you've had this career for so many years doing radio and interviewing bands and just getting on the mic and sort of, interacting with so many different people over the years. And obviously for me, that's a great interest given, what the fuck we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Where did that all start for you? And has that sort of added an extra layer of benefit for the band over the years by having that additional media sort of dynamic that you've sort of built up as a skill set?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you ask Sean, he would say it's good and it's bad, because I do have a little bit of he's like, well, that band put out an album and you featured them and got them in for an interview and did 3 tracks, but we put it out an album and you don't do anything. And it's like, well, I feel like I'm a bit of a dick if I'm doing that on this show and
hard.
doing, it's kind of, it is kind of tough. But yeah, I mean, like a lot of people that are probably listening to this, as a kid, when I had my first job, after school job or part-time job, I invested all of that money, went into Hit Parader magazine, Cream magazine, Hot Metal magazine, Metal Hammer magazine, right? And vinyl. So I'd buy those magazines and read them cover to cover and absorb all this stuff. And I really wanted to write about music. I did journalism at high school, I did media studies at high school. I wanted to write gig reviews. I wanted to write album reviews. I wanted to interview people and talk to them about music. So it's always something that I wanted to do. And then I went and did a radio course and got a job in radio. And my main interest in getting into radio was that it was about music, which shows how little I knew about what commercial radio was really about. But I wanted to be, I guess, like a John Peel or a Molly Meldrum for an Australian audience, somebody that talked to bands, introduce, like a tastemaker in a way, introduce people to bands, go, I love this band, they're amazing, more people should fucking love them, and introduce people to them. And that's what I wanted to do, and that's what I always wanted to do. So, I mean, from a media career, I did a lot of won't mean a lot to Australian listeners, but there are 2 big rock stations in New Zealand. There's Radio Hauraki and there's The Rock. They're both nationwide, and I've worked on both. And for The Rock, I was the music director for 8 years, and that's probably the bigger of the 2 nowadays. And so I always had those connections with the record companies and with the promoters, which definitely helped the band. I had personal relationships with guys that ran the big clubs and brought bands over. And so it was easy for me to go, hey, and they knew me, so they knew that they weren't going to get some dickhead turn up on the night who was going to be a problem. So that helped us in a way, because a lot of these promoters weren't metalheads. So they just go, oh, he's in a metal band. I know him. I know what I'm going to get. So yeah, sweet, you can do the gig. And so we've got a lot of gigs that way. Through those connections, which have been really, really good for us and got us in front of a lot of people. So that's definitely helped, things. And I've just, continued to do that and continued since I left The Rock and set myself up. I've got a show called The Metal Bar, which was a TV show originally on a station over here called Juice TV, and is now a radio show that's, simulcast on about 7 stations around the country. And I've, continued to interview. I've written for, maniacsonline.com.au. I've written some stories for them, interviewed people from like the Deftones and Disturbed and bands like that, and done, written write-ups for them and reviews. And I continue to do that and continue to have relationships with promoters and record companies and things. And it, definitely helps. You get known in the industry as someone that people can rely on and someone that's not going to fuck shit up and someone that's not going to be a dickhead, and you're a safe bet. So that definitely helps. I mean, I know we've been around for a long time, but there are bands that have been around, or that were around as long as we were at the time, but have had loose cannons in them that promoters don't want to deal with, So we've managed to, that might have had better album sales than us in some cases, like 8 Foot Sativa, you would know, for example, but we've opened for Megadeth, Hell Yeah a couple of times, Chimera, Korn, Biohazard, Fear Factory, Sepultura, Death Angel. There's been so many. It's been,
just
we've been really, really lucky.
Small time bands,
Yeah, we've been really, really lucky. Lord, obviously, as well.
Thanks,
Just to complete that list. But we've been able to do all of that, and a lot of that is down to those connections that I've had, which have been really good for the band. I mean, there's no getting around it, and there is in any scene, there are people that'll call you out on it and go, "You're just getting that because of this," and there is a certain amount of truth to that. But fuck. What would you do if you were me?
Oh, absolutely right. And I've seen this as a common thing that has popped up quite a bit in conversations I've had with guys that have been around for quite a few years and have had different levels of success, whether it be sort of getting a deal or getting a support spot or whatever it might be. And it all comes back to that networking aspect, and also just the reputation that you hold and the way that you interact and choose to interact with people. And I think just that trustworthy, reliable dynamic of your personality is just so underrated and understated, because I think a lot of people sit back, like you sort of said before. Some bands, some musicians, get a great break. They put out some amazing music. They might sell a shit ton of music and do really well, but their success might be fleeting because they're really difficult to deal with. They might not have a lot of respect for the people that they interact with, and so their longevity is really compromised. And some of the guys who are a little bit more of a slow burn but stick around for a long time have as many, or if not more, opportunities because they've been able to just show up, not cause a lot of fuss, be respectful, and always look to give value to other people. And I'm always a broken record about this stuff because it's one of the values that I hold so strongly. Is just like every time I'm interacting with somebody, and I might be an idiot sometimes, but it's not a malicious idiot. I'm just doing it for a joke sometimes. But for the most part, I'm always just trying to be the good guy and help people and give value. And how can I help? How can I make sure that my interaction with this person is going to be as easy as possible? And I always hope that, in the back of my mind, that whenever my name or our band is being discussed, even casually as a throwaway comment, that it's going to always have some sort of a positive spin on it or a positive light. I never want people to talk shit about us in a bad way that's got some sort of legitimacy attached to it. I don't want them to have valid reasons to hang shit on us. So I think a lot of bands sort of forget about that, and it's nice just to hear you say that because it's just so understated.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and I'll give you an example. And I don't mind doing this because the band's not together anymore, and he certainly hasn't been with the band for a while. But the guy who was the bass player in 8 Foot Sativa, he had an alcohol problem, and I'm sure he'd be the first to admit that. I haven't seen him in years, so I don't know where he's at now, or if he's sober, or if he sorted himself out or not. But the band, before I was in the band, they got to open for Megadeth at a theatre over there, held about 2,500-3,000. And they were told by Megadeth's tour manager, "Hey guys, hang out, and then after the show, come and have drinks with the band. It'd be cool. Come and hang out." And so they were fizzing, because they were like, "Fuck, Megadeth, this is great. We've had the invite." The guy that they got to do their teching that day was this guy, and the guy who was the singer in the band at the time, had a hip flask of whiskey backstage, and this guy got into it and nicked it before the gig.
Yeah.
And then, unbeknownst to them, I think while they were on stage, or must have been just after they got off stage, was bad-mouthing Dave Mustaine to his face, calling him a dickhead and talking about Metallica and shit, and just been and got the whole band kicked out of backstage, and that was it. They didn't get to see them. They didn't get to have a drink with them. They didn't get to hang out with them. None of that, so he, and then fast forward a few years, when I was at The Rock, they came up for an interview, and they had been, I think it was on the night show, and they had been on a national tour, and they'd been in Christchurch, and it was in the middle of winter, and I can't remember where they were playing, but the fire alarm had gone off, so everybody had to go out, and this is before they'd played. And Christchurch in the winter is quite cold. It's like, it makes Canberra look tropical. And they, it might have even been snowing. And, so the fire department went through, the cops turned up, saw, a whole bunch of metalheads on the street, and they're like, what's going on here? And basically there was a bit of I don't know if it was aggravation with the police, but there was basically some, they went, well, the fire department took quite a while. By the time they let everybody back in and said the venue's fine, about half the audience had left because they'd gone home because they got sick of waiting, or they got cold or whatever. And, on air on this major network radio station that broadcasts all over New Zealand, it would be like doing it on Triple M, right? That's probably the best case. Called the police department in Christchurch and the fire department in Christchurch fucking cunts twice. And obviously that went down really well. And it meant that the band got banned from the radio station, to the point that they would. The guy who was the station manager wouldn't even take money off them for advertising. He was like, nah. And so that's the sort of damage that shit can do,
And it's, I mean, I know this from mates over the years. There's this element where you sort of, everyone sort of thinks back to, you know, the stereotypical 80s LA sort of rock scene, you know, the Motley Crues and the Guns N' Roses and all these bands that sort of like everything's excess, everything's about, you know, causing controversy and things like that. But I think even for them, I mean, back then, different dynamic. There was a lot of protection there. They already had their stakes firmly planted where they could get away with a lot more. And I think there's just so many bands who just have this false sense of security where they can run their mouth or act crazy because that's sort of like the stereotypical sort of vibe of what, you know, a musician or a metal musician should be. And people find out the hard way that most of the time it just ends up with a lack of opportunity and just missing out on a lot of stuff. And we see it so often. I mean, one of the things I remember just getting into music and before when the band was still called Dungeon, and you know, I'd help the guys out from a roadie point of view. And I remember the guys, I was just my mind sort of just opened up completely when they used to talk before gigs and say, look, these are the things we need to keep in mind. The headliner doesn't give a fuck about us in the nicest possible way, so we need to stay out of their way. If they interact with us and talk with us, fantastic, but don't go and be a punisher. Don't go and get in their face. Don't try and get into their room. Don't try to ask for autographs, get a photo, blah, blah, blah. We're on stage, we're doing our support. Make sure all that shit's set up beforehand. We're easy to deal with. Don't get precious about your sound, blah, blah, blah. When the set's over, we need to pack down and get off within 5 minutes max. That's our record. That's what we need to do. Anything more than that is completely inappropriate. So no carefully taking off your cymbals and delicately putting them in your bag and doing everything on stage and winding up your cables. Grab everything in a heap, work out where you're going to place it after the show, dump it in that corner, and while the headliner's on stage playing, then you can go back and start packing your stuff up. That's how we do it. And so there's all these things that they always spoke about before shows, and it just, for me, set a foundation of this is the separation between amateurs and pros. And the only way that you're going to get even considered for anything is that you've got to act like you're not even, like they can't even see you. And if they're going to see you, they're going to see you in the best possible light, but for no other reason whatsoever. You cannot be in their line of path when they're walking from one room to the other. You can't have your shit everywhere. Don't ask them questions. Don't just totally just give them the space that they need. And things like that, I just think they're not often thought about in bands, because I think bands just get excited and they want to live the lifestyle and they want to live in excess, and you might get lucky sometimes, but I think other times it's a lot of the times it ends up in absolute ruin.
Yeah, you're right. And and if you want that opportunity again, you got to behave like what you were talking about. You can't be a punisher or a dickhead, or basically you can't be unprofessional. That's what it comes down to. And I know a lot of bands in this part of the world, we don't do it full time because there's not the money there to make it a full time gig. But the guys who you're supporting do it full time. It is what they do for a job, and the people out front, they all work jobs and they've paid good money to see a show, so they don't want to see you fuck it up. So you have to treat it and be as professional as you can. That's really the key. And then we're exactly the same. That's kind of how we think and how we behave when those things are presented to us.
Well, I mean, just you rattling off, doing a bit of name dropping before, for good reason. But just some of those bands that you rattled off before. I mean, that's proof in the pudding that that first opportunity that you guys did the right thing, and it led to the next one and the next one and the next one. And it comes down to understanding that it's not just hey, we got this opportunity, let's party and let's make the most of it in this excessive way. It's a case of we've got our foot in the door now. How do we stay here for as long as possible? What do we need to do to make this sustainable? And it's about just, sometimes it's missing opportunities as well. It's sometimes you see something that looks like incredible fun and you could run at something and take advantage of a situation, especially if you've got, one of your idols sort of walking around and you go, I really want to chew that bastard's ear off. And then you realize, actually, no, they look pissed off. They look like their mind's elsewhere. So I'm just going to sit back and let them be. And sometimes that's the best decision that you can make, because it means that you're going to get that next show.
Yeah, exactly, mate. Couldn't have said it any better. I mean, and I've been in a lucky situation where I've been on the other side of the fence in terms of being, doing it with the radio job and getting invites to gigs and, getting invites from record companies to meet and greets and stuff. So I've been able to meet people as well, and not have that pressure of also performing on the night and having the luxury of just being able to be a fan. And that's nice too. So, I've been very lucky in my career to have both sides of the fence, I guess.
And I think that helps with your own reputation as far as, whether you're playing or not. It's just your presence and being available and interacting with people would naturally just sort of have a flow-on effect to everything else that you're involved with. So it's sort of, even if you're going to enjoy yourself as a fan, I mean, I think you would still, even if it's subconscious, you'd still sort of have an element of just making sure that you're keeping it somewhat professional and not getting too loose, because obviously, you're there as a for a particular reason, or you've been invited because of a particular reason.
Yeah, that's right. I do remember when Iron Maiden were here. Was it last time they were here, or the time before they were here? And there was a meet and greet sort of thing in between the opening band and them, I think, or that might have been while the opening band was on. They were doing something, and I was in there and I was talking to Yannick, and Yannick is a big football fan, and I'm a big football fan, in terms of like the round ball football. And so we're chatting away about his football team and about football in general. And we might have been talking for about 5 minutes. And then Ron, who's their manager, is an absolute legend of the industry, comes over and he looks at me and he goes, "You talking about fucking football?" And I was just like, "Yeah, we are." And he just laughed. He went, "He's got fucking girls to talk to. Fuck off." And I just laughed and Yannick laughed and it was all good, and he wandered off to meet some other people, and then I went and I had a chat to Dave Murray. So what am I worried, but it was those are the kind of situations you get yourself into.
It just, I mean, total pinch yourself moments, and you probably, I'm sure it'd be like it for you, because I've certainly been in these moments before where you're in there, you're talking to these people, and you're not even realizing what's going on, because it's you sort of flow into this natural sort of conversation with somebody, and you're talking about something that's not even music related, which is fantastic. And it's only afterwards where you sort of come down a little bit and go, "Did that just fucking happen? Like, was I just standing around talking football with Yannick? Like, are you fucking serious?" But at the time, you sort of, I guess you're in there, you're present in the conversation, you're just talking to another person who's a fan of something similar to you.
Yeah, well, probably the one that stands out the most on that front was after that first Hell Yeah gig, because we opened for them, I think, 2 or 3 times. Whenever they came back, we ended up getting the gig. So, and they invited us after the first show up to their dressing room for a drink, and it was when Guns N' Roses were touring Chinese Democracy. Yep. And Sebastian Bach's band was opening, and him and Vinnie Paul are good mates, and so him and his band had turned up to watch, and we saw them, they watched us, and then they watched Hell Yeah, and then they were all in the dressing room afterwards. And I remember standing there, and directly opposite me is Vinny with a bottle of vodka in one hand and a Corona in the other, and Metal Mike, who was Sebastian's guitarist from Pain Museum, he was to my left, Sebastian's to my right, and there's a joint going around the circle, and I don't even know what we were talking about, just talking shit about whatever, blah blah blah. And I was saying something, and I'd taken a drag on this joint, and then I had it between my fingers, and I was finishing whatever I was saying, and then I just get this tap on the shoulder, and I look over at Sebastian, and he was like, "You finished with that?" I'm like, "Oh, sure, bro." Hand him the joint, and then it's kind of, that was one of those, "What the fuck am I doing here? How did this happen?" moments.
Oh man, just blows your mind, doesn't it? It's just,
it does,
especially being younger and sort of getting into music and wanting to be in a band and all that sort of stuff, and then just, if you had that crystal ball and sort of thinking about, looking into the future, you just go, "No fucking way. Like, no way that would happen." And then here you are.
Yeah, well, I remember years ago being at the Logan Campbell Centre, seeing Skid Row on their first album tour, being there screaming my tits off down the front for that. And then, fast forward, 20 years and there we are. So, yeah, no, it was good times.
Oh, incredible. Mate, I'm keeping an eye on the time. I haven't even got started with half the things I want to talk about, but I do need to keep this neat and tidy, so I'm going to do another one with you later on. But okay, cool. I think before we wrap it up, just really quickly, I I think one thing, I've got to be careful here because I'm going to open up a can of worms, and I'm really trying to get better with this time stuff, and I've got another podcast I need to do. So we'll start talking about this, but we'll leave it as a bit of a cliffhanger, and we'll catch up soon and talk a bit more about this. But for me, I've noticed something between Australia and New Zealand when it comes to metal. Got some great bands, both countries. Some bands make the decision to tour, come over to New Zealand, play a few shows. We've got a few Kiwi bands come over and might do an East Coast run. If they're lucky, they might get all the way over to Perth. But I don't see a lot of that happening. And I see a lot of success with Kiwi bands internationally. I see the same in Australia, but there's not a lot of interaction as much as I would expect, given that we're so close. I mean, you guys are closer to me than my mates over in Perth. And it blows my mind that we haven't worked out a way to integrate and be feeding off each other and interacting a lot more between bands. And so rather than getting too deep into that discussion, because I reckon we could talk for a long time about that, and I've got a lot of ideas, so we'll stay tuned for part 2. What are some bands at the moment in New Zealand where, for my listeners, and a lot of them are Aussies, what bands should people start with? Or who's currently out there doing the rounds and releasing some good music that people can start to get a taste of what is actually going on over there?
Well, I guess it depends on sort of what your diet of metal looks like. I mean, if you like stuff that's a bit more extreme, then Blindfolded and Led to the Woods, who I mentioned earlier, fantastic band, picking up a lot of overseas attention, both the US and the UK. I saw a review of that album that came out on March the 26th that said, I know it's only March the 26th, but this is the album of the year, I'm calling it. No. And that came out of a US publication. So I was like, cool. That's some things. So yeah, they're really, really good. In terms of for guys who are more maybe into the Lord sound and your audience, Devil's Skin, if you haven't discovered them, I mean, they're doing great things. I've played Download maybe twice now, or they were supposed to play a second time and then maybe COVID hit. But, they've played. They're a fantastic band. Got some great sort of stadium anthem type songs. Kind of, I guess you'd say they're more hard rock than metal, but they have very metal moments as well. And then there's Shepherd's Reign, who you should definitely keep an eye out for if you haven't seen them. Those boys, all Samoan guys out of South Auckland, and they are doing some brilliant stuff. They've got a new album coming out later in the year, and man, some of the tunes those guys have got, the presence they have live is amazing. They use some of the traditional island percussion as well, which gives it a bit of a different flavour. They sing in Samoan as well, not all the time, but some of the time, and they do some really cool shit. So they're worth keeping an eye on. I would imagine most of your audience would know Alien Weaponry.
They seem to be doing okay now.
Yeah, they're doing all right. They've played Varkin and a few, and they've done a lot of those tours. They've opened for Slayer around Europe and stuff. Crazy. So, yeah, they've just been signed by Slayer's management actually. So, so things are looking on the up and up for them. There's a few other bands. I mean, there's one that I think are really underrated, and I think if you like thrash and you like your thrash maybe a little bit heavier, I guess I'd probably call them blackened thrash. There's a certain black metal element about them. There's a band out of Wellington called Bullet Belt. Their new album, Warlords, is fucking phenomenal. That will tear your face off and shit down your neck. It is superb.
I hope they're using that quote on their PR stuff. Oh, fucking oath.
They will be now. So but then I mean, if you're more into your power metal stuff, maybe, and then check out Forsaken Age as well. Those guys have been around for a little while. And their new album, they managed to get Tim Ripper Owens on that, doing some stuff. Yep. So, which was a pretty big deal. So, I mean, that's just some of the bands that you should check out.
I'm gonna obviously chuck links to Just One Fix, of course, because it'd be silly for me to rattle off all these other bands and then not put you guys in there. But apart from, I'll put links to everything that you guys are involved with, and so people can check out the music. And then I'm going to list a bunch of like those bands and a few others that we played with over the years as well that are just doing great things. And I see lost opportunities when Aussie bands and Kiwi bands aren't interacting more, and I think there's only a very small selection of bands that are actually making the effort to take that step and to try and gel together and try and do things together. And even if it's just a bit of online recognition and sort of praising each other and sort of building those networks and friendships, I just think there's there's so much there that is just not being done, and I'll leave that for round 2 with you, because I reckon you're the man to talk to around what bands could do and sort of dig in a little bit deeper about a few other ideas, because I've got a lot of musos, especially a lot of Aussie musos that listen to this, and I think this could be, especially, I mean, you probably would have seen, I'm sure it's in New Zealand media, but they're talking about an Australia-New Zealand bubble. I don't know how well that's going to go in the short term, but at the very least, it starts the conversation going. So maybe there's an excuse to get out there and start to play some shows.
Yeah, exactly, man. No, that'll be good. And happy to talk to you again, Andy. Like you said, we could do this for another 3 hours. It's the only problem is I've run out of beer.
Yeah, good call. I need to go and refill anyway. All right, mate. Well, I'm going to put links in the show notes. People can check everything out, and keep an eye on you guys with some new music coming in the coming months as well. So we'll, I think maybe when the next, whether it be single or EP or album or whatever the hell you guys choose to do, once some stuff's out, then we'll have another chat. And I've got to go and punish Sean a bit as well. He's got to come on the podcast. So I'll
definitely
I'll get you guys both on at some stage to have a chat.
Sounds good, man. Hey, listen, thanks very much. Really appreciate it. And, hopefully we can get over there and play some shows with Lord sometime soon.
Sounds good. Yeah, we've got to return the favour. Hey, now, I think you could tell at the end there, I was just chomping at the bit to just dive down that rabbit hole of New Zealand and Aussie metal. Just there's lots of things to talk about there, but I'm going to get Riccardo back on the podcast in the coming weeks and talk a little bit more about that. He is one of the few people in New Zealand who is just one of those go-to people when it comes to understanding what's going on over there in the metal scene, the hard rock scene. Just a wealth of knowledge. He's obviously got a lot of credentials and reputation and legacy, especially with Just One Fix in New Zealand. And I think for me, one of the big focuses is I want to bring more of you guys, because a lot of you guys are from Australia. There are people overseas and a few of you Kiwis, I see you. But I want to bring more and more people toward what is this amazing scene in New Zealand. And given that our Kiwi mates are so close, it sort of blows my mind that I haven't done this sooner. So I had a bunch of great New Zealanders on the podcast previously, but I'm going to certainly make more of an effort over the coming months to get more and more amazing musos and other people from New Zealand on the podcast. But we're going to get Riccardo back on, have a bit of a talk, maybe strategize, maybe work out a few little things that we could do to sort of bring the worlds together a bit more. So stay tuned for that one. But in the meantime, go and check out Just One Fix. I'm going to have links to the social media pages, Facebook and Instagram. It's Just One Fix NZ. They're on the streaming platforms as well, Spotify, Apple Music, the like. So I'm going to have everything in the show notes. Go and check out the Metal Bar radio show that Riccardo does. I'll have links to that. And also, I forgot to mention, because we spoke about this at the end of the chat, Riccardo mentioned a whole bunch of amazing bands in New Zealand that are doing great things, and I also remembered a heap of great bands that we've played with over the years as well. So I'm going to dump in the show notes, and if I haven't done this by the time this episode comes out, can someone just slap me? Give me a digital slap and go, Andy, fucking get your shit together. But I'm going to put in a bunch of links, maybe just Spotify pages or something like that. I'll keep it fairly simple. To a lot of these bands, so you can just get a taste and go and check them out. Maybe Spotify and Facebook or something like that. I'll just put 2 links for each band, and I'll put a list in there and dig in. Let me know what you like, what you don't like, and reach out to those bands. And actually do that. Reach out to these bands that I list. Tell them that you discovered or you heard them or you clicked through because you heard me crapping on about them or talking about listing them on the Anti-Social podcast. And let's expand this family. Let's make this a bigger unit of people, not just Aussies, but a lot of Kiwis listening in as well. So anyway, that's my little soapbox moment. So before we wrap it up, of course, patreon.com/Andy Dowling is the best way to support this podcast. And support starts from only $1 a month. Dirt cheap, set and forget. You won't even notice it. And if you want access to an exclusive Patreon podcast each week, or a bunch of free shit, giveaways, free merch, depending on the tier that you join, there are additional tiers there, so you can pay a little bit more and get access to that stuff. But for me, my focus is to get as many $1 supporters as possible. The more, the merrier. And obviously, the money is a massive thing. It alleviates a lot of the burden of ongoing weekly, monthly costs of running a podcast, production, hosting, gear, getting around town, just all this sort of stuff. That's a massive weight off my shoulders, but I think more importantly, it's a great motivation and accountability piece of having people directly investing into the podcast and supporting what I do. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much to all those people. And before I wrap it up, I just forgot, I need to just reach over my desk here. So I'm going to awkwardly do it while I'm still talking on the microphone. Can I do it? Yes, I can. This is really horrible podcasting because I need to keep these outros concise and short. But a massive thank you, of course, to my top tiers, my top tier supporters over at Patreon. These guys are the heavy hitters. They're part of the wider community of people that support the podcast. So these guys in particular, thank you so much to Andrew from Perth, Mick G from Sydney, Ash from Deniliquin, Dan from Dapto, Rod from Rayleigh in North Carolina, Patrick from Canberra, Liam from Brisbane, Chris from Sydney, Brendo from Leeton, Tim from Canberra, James from Brisbane, Christian from Canberra, Steve from the Gold Coast, and Andrew from Sydney. Thank you very much, guys. And I tell you what, you know who's missing? A bloody New Zealander. So who's going to be the first Kiwi to join my Patreon? Patreon.com/Andy Dowling. Go and check it out. If you've got any questions, hit me up. Next episode, who the hell knows? I'm recording like a madman. I've got a hat full of names that I've recorded, and I'm just going to pick them out of the hat. So let's see what happens. So until next episode, folks, take care and ta-ta.